which typically means they're not purchasing, they're not transacting on an ad, they're not going to buy your whole service online. You have to come in for a consultation, wherever it might be. And that's the same thing with when I run ads for my agency. We spend probably $30,000 a month on ads just for getting clients for us. So it's the same way that you'd say, okay, you have to figure out, okay, how much is a customer, we work backwards here, is like, how much is a customer worth to us? Usually we say, on like a first purchase or first transaction, so like the first 30 days, and then, a lifetime value. And usually for lifetime value, depends industry to industry. For us, we look at a 6-month lifetime value. And ideally you want to be, cash flow positive, or at least at a break even, especially if you're in a high lifetime value business. So think any sort of membership, or, I'm sure you have patients come back, and like if there's multiple purchases, then you might be able to be more aggressive with that lifetime value. But most of the time we want to be cash flow positive on the first purchase, because hey, if we're cash flow positive on the first purchase, all the gravy. It's great. All the returning's bonus. So from there, once we understand, what the price points are, great. Then we'll figure out like, what's our gross profit on that? So how much does it actually cost you to provide that service? Okay, great. Now we should have a gross profit metric. And then from there we can say, okay, that gross profit is like our break-even acquisition on the front end. So like, let's just say for examples purposes, you have $1,000 offer, $200 is the cost of goods sold. We have $800 of gross profit. So I can afford to spend up to $800 on marketing to acquire that customer, or else I'm in the red on the first purchase. But some brands are fine with if they have strong lifetime value. So for then when it's a chiropractor or any local business, you're going to launch ads. You're going to want to have an offer, and you can frame that. I know you said like you don't want to do like any gimmicky type stuff. Like there's ways to stay premium, stay luxury. There's ways to position a good offer that's still appealing, and you're going to have, obviously the way that we track it is obviously they'll opt in. So whether it's a lead form or they book a consultation as a calendar or something, they book in. You can see, depending on what CRMs or software you use, you can tag them if they're from paid ads, ideally track them all the way through their journey. And then for a lot of times for local businesses, they struggle with people opting in, but actually getting them in the door. So usually you want to have a good follow-up system, calling them up, hey, confirming your appointment, some emails, blah, 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 get them all warmed up. They come, transact. And so what you're going to track throughout that process is what's our lead cost, what's our cost per show consultation, someone actually walked through the door or whatever, and then our cost per acquisition, or cost per patient, wherever we call it in this industry, but essentially that will be our baseline. And so I would recommend like any local business maybe start running $50 a day in ads. And sometimes for these businesses, like you might only need couple customers to break even, from that. And so it's really important to track that too, because like ads, you can 100% see if a lead opts in, where they came from, did they show up with just a proper CRM and pipeline.
Give me your opinion on this. So I haven't done much in the cold marketing, right? Mm-hmm. I utilize something called Zocdoc. Are you familiar with it?
So like a referral?
It is. So like if you were wanting to go on there and find a dermatologist, you would go on there and basically it's free to be a part of it as a doctor, and you pay per acquisition, right? Mm-hmm. So per someone puts on my schedule, I pay them $50, right? At the very beginning, I was like, this is a really expensive thing. And then I was looking at, more recently actually, because I've really dove into this in the past couple months, what the lifetime value is, even if they just show up once, what that value is. So there are ways that you can actually, it's called sponsored on there, where you basically pay to be a higher listing. And at first I was like, how much do I want to put towards this? And then I thought to myself, well, if you throw $1,000 at Meta, cold people, they're not necessarily looking for a doctor, where something like Zocdoc, you're only paying for that acquisition of a client, and they're a warm or hot, I'm not a marketing guy, but a warm or even a hot lead, because they're actively looking for that. What's your opinion on something like that for my industry?
So I think it's if the cost makes sense, it's a good play. But obviously it makes your business so much more valuable, effective, and profitable if you can solve your own customer acquisition source, right? So I think those are totally viable, 100%. I think there's like a few fundamentals for like a local business to do well. It's like, okay, are we ranking high on Google when someone search for us? Do we have good Google reviews? It's a lot of that stuff, and even ranking on these sites. But I think, you know, the idea that like on Meta, they know the behavior of everyone. So the second that anyone searches up, you know, back pain or whatever, and they're in this area, like Meta's going to feed your ads to that. So they still do. It's not just like completely cold, you know, unqualified people seeing your ads. Over time, the algorithm will be like, okay, this guy's a chiropractor. We're only going to feed this ads to people showing signs, you know, based upon their data. Like they know everyone in this area and what their interests are.
Can you tailor that data to, hey, I want, you know, stay-at-home moms that like how much people say that you can do that. I've not gotten in the weeds. You would obviously know better. How much niching down can you do on these ads?
Yeah. So if we were talking like 3 to 5 years ago, when I first got started in the space, it was all about in the ads manager, like targeting, you know, if you want to target women, men, certain age demographics, interests, you know, they even had, at one point they had, you know, income bracket. Like you would go like super in the weeds in the Meta ads manager of actually like trying to parse out and do that manual targeting. Now, with all this AI, this is the conversation I have constantly with our clients, is that we actually want to keep targeting relatively broad. So like for local business, it would be, we definitely want to be just basically geo-target, maybe an age demo, but that's it. And then the creative does a lot of the targeting. So for, you know, creative, you know, what the Meta will scan, what does the creative and copy say? Okay, you know, if the copy is targeting this demographic, okay, cool. What's even down to like the skin color of the people in the ads, like the copy in the ad, everything there, it will then take that and then do the targeting for us. And so that's what some of that, yeah, it's nutty. So like for almost all of our clients, we barely do a lot of manual targeting on the ad level. It's mostly like making sure the creative is speaking to that target demo and the copy, and then Meta will take that. And we're seeing that it is more efficient and effective, probably 8 times out of 10 than trying to be super
That's
manual.
Interesting. And would you say that is a broad stroke, like across e-commerce, local businesses, like all of that?
Yeah, I'd say yes, pretty much. Yeah, the algorithm, it's nutty, but like, yeah, literally,
it's nutty.
It's crazy, but yes, they literally, they would probably do a better job finding your customers than you trying to like manually do it. Because what happens is if you're manually doing it, you're kind of putting the algorithm like in its own little like restriction. And so the theory is that Meta is actually better at finding your customers. So if you like say you're only targeting, you know, women ages 35 to 45, well, Meta's like, oh no, there's tons of patients here. These people that are all over there are more qualified, and that'll actually bring your cost per lead or patient down. So
now what if you does this still apply if you sell something like private jet travel?
Yeah, you know, it actually does. I mean, like for me, right, I advertise for my business. I am looking for companies that are already doing probably $1 million a year, that have a good budget, you know, to spend on marketing and ads and our team. Like it's a lot of expenses going into it. So these have to be pretty successful people. There's no targeting I do on my level, right?
Interesting.
So it's completely broad. Man. Yeah.
That is not what I
that's why I think like, whether it's yourself or anyone listening that's looking about getting into ads, like you can do some damage on your, like a lot of these agencies that's coming from agency guy, like at a small level, you can kind of get away with some things. It's usually when you're trying to scale or when you're dealing with big budgets or your time's more valuable, then it makes sense to bring on someone.
Yeah. We mentioned Meta a lot. Yeah. Is Meta the channel, or like what other channels? Is LinkedIn, Reddit, YouTube, pre-roll and all that stuff? Yeah, for local businesses, I actually think probably Google is like probably priority number 1, I'd say, because it's so search-based and so search intent. You want to rank the highest. Pretty easy to do that. Meta would be priority number two. And then, I mean, for local businesses too, like I'm bullish on just like actually like a lot of traditional like advertising and marketing and showing up to events, shaking hands, you know, flyers, like all the traditional stuff, I think goes a long way. And then for e-commerce, basically most of our clients, probably 70% of their spend goes towards Meta, maybe 30% goes towards Google. TikTok is a wild, wild west.